Thank you for joining Conversations with Andres Ilves. I'm honored today to talk to Mr. Ehud Olmert, former Prime Minister of Israel. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So obviously you've been in the news a lot lately with comments on the ongoing war in Gaza. I wanted to start by asking you, in the brief time we have today, when you reflect back on your own experience in the Northern War, Lebanon, of course, in 2006, if you can draw some parallels between the situation that Israel faced and the response and the situation that Israel faced on October 7th and after in Gaza, and kind of your reflections comparing the two and so on.
I don't think that there is much to be able to compare between the two events, the second war in Lebanon in 2006 and the war now in Gaza. The war in Lebanon started after two Israeli soldiers were abducted. We knew they were dead, they were killed before the abduction, and that they were shooting across the board with rockets, and they ambushed an Israeli tank, and they caused another 8 casualties. But of course, this was a minor event in comparison to what happened in August 7th, which was the biggest disaster in the history of the State of Israel. Nothing that can be compared, no parallel at all. The difference, I think, is not in the circumstances that led the war, but the expectations that we have created about these two events. From the first minute in the war, in the second war in Lebanon, I advised the chief of staff of the Israeli army and the others, let's not blow things out of proportion. We need now to engage, of course, because we were prepared to the event that they will sabotage and provoke, and that we decided that we need to respond. But we have to engage on the basis of limited objectives. What we need is to deter them from repeating the same kind of attack, and that's more or less what we need. Okay, there is not something like surrender, total victory, all these kind of things. And actually we achieved it. It took us 32 days of exchanges with the Hezbollah, but afterwards there were 17 years of complete silence, not one single shot, not one single bullet, because the border between Lebanon and Israel, unlike anything that was typical of the situation until then. This was there. In the Gaza war, from the beginning, Netanyahu set an objective which was unachievable and non-realistic. And I advised those that who were ready to listen on the first few days, and everyone was, horrified by the events and the emotions were very high. I said, listen, Netanyahu sets an objective which will not be achieved, but which will possibly allow him to say, okay, I want it, but the army was not capable of achieving it. They said, total victory, I don't know what it is, but if someone thinks that he can eliminate every single Hamas fighter, that there will never be a gun holder in Gaza again, and this is ridiculous. It will never happen. But it can justify carrying on a war forever, which we thought from the beginning was something that Netanyahu wanted. So the two events are entirely different, and I think that the interest or the motivation or the what disturb or occupy the mind of the decision makers, in the case of Lebanon, mine, and in the case of Gaza, Netanyahu's, are entirely different. I don't think that when we were attacked on the in July of 2006, that there was something that was bearing on me, or that it may have been understood or interpreted as a failure that I needed to somehow force myself on the situation to prove that I was not failing, and so on and so forth. Here, from the beginning, the perception was that it was a total failure of everything, of the prime minister, of the government, of the army, of the secret service, whatever. And therefore, the motivation was largely influenced by this sense of failure, which was not the case in Lebanon, and which allowed us a lot more flexibility.
So is there anything you would have done differently in 2006, looking back?
No, I think that we did well. I think that, as far as I was concerned, had I continued to be prime minister after 2009, I would have tried to reach out through the French and the Americans to see if we can talk to the Lebanese and to the Hezbollah and see if there is a certain accommodation that can be made in order to guarantee that we will not find ourselves in some kind in the future in a direct confrontation. But the war itself, I think, was, you can always say, okay, on the second day, on the third day, on the fifth day, on the 20th day, you could have done this or that, but marginal. On the substance of what happened, I think it was managed reasonably well.
And so by the same token, is there anything you feel that Israel has done correctly in the response to October 7th?
Almost nothing. To start with, I have to say, I didn't say it publicly, but I thought it at the time. But I understood why it may have not been possible. I would have tried to see, after the first 2-3 days in which there was still an attempt to rescue the people living in the south. I mean, when the terrorists were still dispersed somehow in the south of the Gaza region, in the settlements, I would have asked the Qataris if there is an option for a deal to bring back immediately all the hostages for a commitment not to respond. I know it sounds crazy. How could you? I mean, I don't know if it may have been possible in terms of containing the rage that was pouring from every corner, from every mouth, from every eyes in Israel. But I mean, in terms of long-range strategy, it may have been a lot better had we reached an agreement before we started, when Yahya Sinwar was still very, at least in his own mind, very powerful and had a lot of success, that he could have entertained the joy of his success before he, get into a massive Israeli retaliation. Maybe that could have provided us with a period that I think was necessary. Definitely now, with a retrospect, it may have been necessary. Number one, had we been able to accomplish it, which is doubtful. I don't know. But you ask me what would I try to do differently? I would have tried to do it differently in this respect. Had it been successful and there would have been an exchange with an Israeli commitment not to respond, not to retaliate, first of all, it would have changed, it would have created an entirely different atmosphere in the state of Israel from then on, which, all the riots, all the demonstrations, all the confrontations, all the polarization, all the hatred and intolerance, which is being expressed from all sides against all sides, we'd have avoided it, and we'd have had the hostages at home, and we would have gone through a certain healing process within Israel, considering the sense of failure and the insult of being exposed to such a failure, then at any time in the future, we would have been able to plan a surprise attack at some time in the future on the basis of some provocations which Hamas would definitely fall, into, and so on and so forth. It could have been entirely different. But anyway, it didn't happen.
So famously, of course, you're a strong supporter of a two-state solution, and
Right.
I know that, one could say you got pretty close in 2008.
Right.
So, let me just put it this way. What's the way out? What's the way forward? How has your belief in a two-state solution changed over time, certainly in light of October 7th? Where do you stand now compared to where you were some years ago?
I haven't changed my mind about the need to move forward in this direction. You probably heard that I signed a joint statement with Dr. Nasser Al-Qudwa, the former foreign minister and UN ambassador of the Palestinian Authority, which we published and which we distributed across the world. As I think in every foreign office in the world, there is this joint statement that outlines framework for solution on the basis of what I proposed in 2008, the same principle, and we indicated in our statement that it is based on my efforts in 2008 and 9. The question is how practical it is. Is it doable given the circumstances? Look, if you ask me today, what is the attitude in Israel? Definitely, 75% of the Israelis are definitely against, and maybe 25%, and okay, more or less. Is it practically, on ground, on premises, is it still doable? Yes. On the premise, what I propose and what we have just announced, Kidwell myself, is doable. In the 4.4% of the territory, which is designated to be annexed into the state of Israel in the context of this agreement, 82% of the Israelis that live outside of the original green line live in the 4.1%. So the problem remains for 18%, which is still a considerable number. Now, for these 18%, there are different options. One option is that they will stay where they are. They will not have to be evacuated, but they will live in a Palestinian state as Israeli citizens in a Palestinian state. There is one option. If they are so anxious to live where they are and not move, but also they can be relocated into the areas which are within the 4.4%. In other words, in the territories, in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, but not exactly where they are now, but still there. They can be relocated easily, and there is enough place there for them. You have to remember that there is always a misperception about the numbers. Most of the people that live outside of the Green Line live in Jerusalem, and they are the 4.4% also refers to all the neighborhoods which were built in Jerusalem after the 6-Day War. So all the neighborhoods of Piskat Ze'ev and of Ramot, of Gilo, of all these are part of the 4.4% and are part of the 82%, and they are the majority. And the third option for these settlers is to be relocated into Israel. So maybe they will be divided. There will few which will insist on remaining in the territories. There will be Palestinian citizens. More or less 1/3 will want to be relocated into the territories within the 4.4%. Also is possible. And so the evacuation will be much smaller and milder and more reasonable in terms of actual implementation than what seems to us when we talk about the hundreds of thousands of Israelis living in the territories and so on. Now, how can it be advanced? If I will talk today, I talk. But if I will had I been prime minister and I tried to implement it, it would have been exceptionally difficult and tense and confrontational, and you know, it would have led into a major confrontation within Israel between the settlers and the supporters and the Messianic groups, which are much larger than we think they are, and the others. We have to build it up on a strategic move, that the end of which is the new normalization with the Saudis and with the other Arab and Muslim countries, the Indonesians, and also North African countries like Algeria, like Libya, like others, Sudan and others. So we have to talk about a strategic move that will change the balance in the entire Middle East, that will change the status of Israel in vis-a-vis Arab and Muslim countries, which is enormously significant and important, and to put the Palestinian issue as part of a much broader and larger and more historic process. Now, this can, the benefits of such a move, the privileges that Israel will entertain as a result of this, can then be presented to the Israeli public opinion in a different context than just giving up some territorial concessions to the Palestinians and so on and so forth, but on a much broader and more significant basis for Israel. And then it has to be built up, of course, you know, assuming that if there will be an Israeli government that will be in favor of such a move, of course, the status of the government will not be what it is today vis-a-vis the Europeans and the North Americans and all the other, and the Asians and all the others. It would have created an entirely different attitude of acceptance, of respect for Israel, of friendlier, interaction and cooperations between us and many other countries. And so that you have to build it. You have to build it. You have to have the assistance of course, of the Americans. You may create it may be, if properly orchestrated and coordinated, it can be done with it can give a very good basis for a cooperation between America, Russia, and China in Europe in service of such a move. Why? I think that the Chinese and even the Russians may have an interest in having something that stabilizes the Middle East, that saves the superpowers from unnecessary additional front of potential confrontation amongst them. And what happened now, for instance, when America was attacking Iran, which is also now an ally of China and of Russia, okay, this is, the Russians, of course, couldn't act against it or couldn't protest against it. But if you ask them, would you be interested in somehow creating a certain process that changes the balance? I think that they might be interested. In other words, I think for Israel, it is an opportunity of pulling out from a corner that we are stuck in today into something entirely different, which may be also enough a positive incentive for many Israelis that now, when they look at it on a narrow basis, in a very narrow angle, vis-a-vis the Palestinians, say, oh, no, we don't want to do anything with these guys. They are killers, they are murderers, whatever.
Very quickly, then, how have the Abraham Accords and the recent 12-day war with Iran changed the equation with what you're talking about?
First of all, the Abraham Accords were a very important first step. Of course, we have to move forward. Okay, I think that we know what the Saudis want. They know what we want. I mean, there are many different ways in which these things were checked and examined, and can be checked and examined, and so on and so forth. And obviously, what I'm talking about is broadening. I mean, dramatically broadening the Abraham Accord, the basis of Abraham Accord. Okay, but which make it into a global agreement. If you bring in the Indonesian, if you bring in Sudanese, if you bring in the North African countries, of course the Saudis, and so on and so forth, that is changing the balance internationally. That is one thing. I think that, but of course, that requires a change direction vis-a-vis the Palestinians. The one thing which Israel has to do, which I did, and I found it very productive and very important, constructive for the Israeli interests, is to say, I'm prepared to recognize a Palestinian state. I'm ready to pull out from territories. We have to separate from the Palestinians, but not separate without respect. Separate out of respect with pains, with difficulties for us, but with respect for what we think are the fundamental and human rights and civil rights that you deserve to exercise, of self-determination and so on and so forth. I think that, and as long as the Israeli government will not have the power to do it, nothing will move. Not only that nothing will move, but we will deteriorate. It will erode into continuous confrontation, new fronts of confrontations, and also the loss of any healthy and fruitful contacts with the international community that we are already in the process of losing now. If we will have the courage and the wisdom and the inspiration to say, yes, this is what we want, the world will be different, I believe.
And finally, Iran, is it a greater threat after the recent events, a reduced threat?
Look, I think Iran needs to go through a soul-searching process. I hope they will go. I don't know. Had I been an Iranian, I would have said to myself, look, how many tens of billions of dollars we spent in building up the long arm from the north and the long arm from the south, and the Iranian militias in Iraq, and Iranian militias in Syria, and the Houthis, and all these arsenal of ballistic missiles. And what, at the end, what was the bottom line? We lost all these proxies. Fundamentally, we lost them. They are in no position. The cabinet of Lebanon is right now discussing the demand from Hezbollah to disarm themselves and so on. And Iran lost a lot, not completely, but a lot of the status that it entertained vis-a-vis the other Arab countries and other countries in the region, because, listen, starting from the threat to eliminate the state of Israel to being under the total air control of the Israeli Air Force is not something that build up your deterrence and your persuasion. So, had I been the Israeli Prime Minister now, I would have said to Witkoff or to Trump, listen, go talk to the Iranians and say to the Iranians that the time has come for us and them to sit somewhere quiet behind the scenes and see if there is a certain rapprochement that can be worked out. But I'm not the Prime Minister. Bibi is the Prime Minister.
Ehud Olmert, thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you. Take care.